Hey everybody, welcome to YYC Dev. It is our second official meetup this month. Really excited for the speaker that we have on board here. So I'm Serene, for anybody who I haven't met before, and I'm one of the organizers of YYC Dev. So YYC Dev used to be the Ruby meetup group, but we decided that we wanted to expand it to be a little bit more inclusive of the larger community so that we can promote more peer-to-peer mentorship and just more community and networking. So we are expanding into different languages and frameworks. Last month was a bit more React focused, and this month we have Mike here with us to talk about Ionic and Angular. So I'm going to hand it off to him to do his own introduction. And then at the end of the talk, we should have some time for a Q&A. Really glad to have you guys around. There's a chat, so please try to chat with other people since we can't talk in person. Have a good time.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited to be here. I know these are strange times that we live in these days, but still happy to be able to, do what I get to do and just present and talk about some cool stuff that we're doing. So we're going to be talking about building cross-platform apps using Ionic. If you don't know what Ionic is, no worries. We'll cover that whole basics. If you already do know what Ionic is, though, still no worries. We're going to kind of probably get you caught up to speed to some of the cool stuff that we're doing these days. But a quick little bit about myself. My name is Mike Hartington. I like to think of myself as like half developer advocate because I started off as an engineer first, and now I'm doing this whole developer advocate thing. But I do like teaching, and I like helping people just be effective at what they're doing. Not that it really matters, but I'm a Google developer expert for Angular, Firebase, and web technologies. All that really means is I know a good amount about JavaScript or JavaScript. Sorry, my one cheap shot that I get to take. And if you have any questions about anything, put them in the chat right now. Or if you want to reach out afterwards, you can find me on Twitter at @mhartington. So we're talking about building cross-platform apps, but why do we need to talk about this at first? Well, first let's kind of state the obvious, and that's building for mobile it's actually really difficult. If you have never built a mobile app before, chances are you've never actually had to deal with the fact that the multiple platforms that we have to target or code for or design for all come with their own unique changes, their own unique styles, their own interpretations for how things should be done. That really makes it a challenge to build for. But even more important is that once you actually have something that you are building, it becomes even more difficult to maintain that code bases. One of the biggest pain points is that if you add a feature in one platform, maybe that feature doesn't exist in a different platform. So if something exists on Android but doesn't exist on iOS or vice versa, now we're having different code bases that have separate features. We're just kind of at different aspects of it. So it becomes quite difficult to maintain that consistency. If you don't know these languages, well, guess what? You're probably going to have to hire somebody and hire a team that knows iOS in and out, and a team of developers that knows Android in and out. And those are actually pretty complex systems. I've tried learning iOS development a couple times already. It's not for me. Swift makes it a little bit easier, but Objective-C was pretty difficult. Java is not my favorite language, but Java and Android-specific flavor of Java is even more confusing to me. So it's difficult to build for, difficult to design for, difficult to hire for, and difficult to learn. And at the end of the day, those are still only two platforms, and we kind of completely forget about the amazing aspects of the web So we don't get a website or a web app, a progressive web app out of that. So building for mobile is difficult. Um, how could we build something for mobile and have an effective or be effective about it? So what about building for native? Yeah, it's going to get us the highest fidelity. We're going to be using the platforms that they offer. We're going to get great performance, and we're going to get a lot of powerful features from the low-level languages. But like I said, beginning multiple languages to learn, multiple code bases, multiple teams to coordinate, and we still don't get the web. Okay, so we've basically crossed off building an app natively. What about this compiled to native? This is an approach where we take something um, like React Native or Flutter. There are a few other options that exist out there where they take this kind of secondary language that compiles to native and gives you the promise of native performance and native features, but without having to touch these native languages. So that sounds pretty awesome. It sounds like it's a pretty good features. They give you a standard library for accessing APIs. For instance, Flutter gives you an entire feature set for accessing the file system, Bluetooth, geolocation, and the same thing with React Native. And they also give you this promise of truly native cross-platform UI, meaning that they abstract around the entirety of the native design system. So your components, your animations, your transitions between different views and routes. And they give it to you in a way where you never have to touch like storyboards in iOS. So that sounds pretty compelling and sounds like a good reason to use a compiled to native technology. But we get into this pretty uncanny valley. If there's an error in our code, is it an error because of the JavaScript or Dart, or is it an error because of the pre-compiled code, or is it an error because of the native layer? Like, where is this abstraction leaky? Is it leaky at my code, or is it leaky at the lower level features? At the same time, we still need to know a lot about native development. I think a real good example here is folks like Airbnb were using React Native. And at the same time as they were using React Native with the promise of building cross-platform, they ended up maintaining a lot of native iOS and Android code in addition to their React Native projects. So is it really cross-platform? Probably not. And if we're still using this compile to native or using native as our target, we're kind of forgetting about the web. So we're already lost to just these two platforms, and we're forgetting about the web, which is the most accessible platform. So we're not going to build our mobile app using these compile to native technologies. What about web technologies? Well, web technologies run everywhere, essentially. If you can load a browser, you can load a web app. That's pretty awesome. Web technologies are also pretty easy to work with. The reason why HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are like the core building blocks that they teach at boot camps these days is because it's easy for people to get started and to understand the basics and actually build something that they can see on the screen. Probably some features that I think are important, but not everyone else does, it's that it's open standards. You can participate in how the languages change and how the features of the web get implemented. I know one of the really good examples is that I've opened up a feature or a spec discussion for CSS. I'm a nobody, and I can open up a feature discussion for web technologies. So web technologies being open versus these closed platforms, I think is pretty awesome. That, and also you can load it up in 5-10 years down the road and know that it's still going to work. Just look at the Space Jam website. It's accessible both in the ways of being good for accessibility reasons and also accessible as in you don't need a whole lot of a machine or a lot of different pieces of technology to get started with it. And chances are you probably already know it. So building a mobile app using web technology sounds pretty awesome, right? It sounds pretty compelling. There's some really good reasons to build for it. But at the same time, there's some pretty big hurdles that we need to get over. One of the biggest ones is that the web doesn't really have this concept of an SDK or this concept of core components for building out our app. The web being the web, it was designed for documents, not really web apps or apps in general. And what native kind of brings that really makes this better is these core component sets that allow us to define here's what a button works is, and here's how this interaction works. It has all these complex animations and gesture support. Here is a view. Here's how we route, and here's how we have transition between each of these different pages. Anytime you want to build a mobile app with web technologies, you're probably going to have to reinvent some of those features. And that can be pretty boring, pretty daunting, and lead to a lot of messy code or just code that you probably don't even want to write anymore. Now, this is where Ionic comes in and brings a lot of compelling features. So first off, what is Ionic? Well, Ionic is a UI toolkit for building hybrid apps or native apps using web technologies. So they give you the core component set, they give you the styles, the animations, the transitions, everything that you would expect to get from a native SDK, but built with web technologies. They also provide different designs based on the platform that you're loading your app on. So, for instance, if we load it up on an iOS device, we're going to get an app that looks and feels like an iOS app. And if we load it up on Android or in Chrome, we're going to get an app that feels pretty material design. So we get this really nice platform change other than just the visual and styles, but also the interactions with different animations for each one. If you wanted to actually customize this and provide your own different styles or your own different branding guidelines, you can do this also with a pretty extensible API. And not that it really matters, I just think it's a pretty cool fact. If you go to this website called App Figures, you can take a look at the top development SDKs in both iOS and Google Play. Ionic actually powers roughly 10% of all apps, and that's between both iOS and Android. So I think we have like Burger King, Porsche, pretty big companies out there that are using Ionic in their tech stack. So chances are, if you want to work with Ionic and you want to get a job with Ionic, companies are going to hire you. So some of the core components that we have here are things like badges, cards, list items, navigation components, different types of text and typography settings, all the kind of core basic building blocks that you would expect to get out of a design system. So at first, Ionic is just going to give you all these components, and as you start to link everything together, you're going to get this really native-like experience. The gestures and animations, if we have, okay, cool, video's auto-playing. As you start to navigate around into your app, as we see over here, we can start to interact with all the elements, the items, the different components in overlays, and start to have some kind of animation and gesture support between. If we go to a new route right now, we could swipe to go back and actually get some really nice interactions between not only the leading component, but the component that's about to come back into focus and become our active component. And all this is kind of like wired up automatically for you. So you're not having to do the low level changes of, okay, back button appear here, title button appear here. Okay, now wire up this gesture. All automatically done for you. Platform continuity, like I mentioned, is our philosophy of making sure that our components feel right at home per their platform design. So as we see on the left, we have an Android device, which is loading up a list of cards that feel right at home for Android. On the right, we have a list of cards for iOS, and the design is subtly different. There's a little bit more elevation to the iOS card, a little bit more rounded corners around the border. The text and padding is a little bit different, but these really small details that make us pretty much a one-to-one match for the native design systems. So pretty important things. Your users will, hopefully not even notice that we're doing anything because they just want their app to work and feel right at home. If your app does not have these kind of style and these kind of details taken care of for you, that's when your users notice. So having Ionic in here, make sure that your app just feels like any other app. And then if you want to start accessing native device features, things like local notifications, geolocations, analytics, file system access, you can start doing this with a add-on layer called Capacitor, which we'll look at in a little bit, which allows you to actually take your web app, access native device features, and then bundle it all together into a native binary that you can just ship to the stores. We can look at that in, like I said, in a little bit, but it's no different than just integrating with any other third-party JavaScript library. And probably, like I said, my most favorite feature is that it's open source. Everything is up on GitHub. Everything is MIT license free. You can just download it, use it however you want. Meaning that if there's features or if there's features that you want or features that you think would make the framework better, or if there's even bugs that you discover for some odd reason, you can either contribute to it or open issues and get some feedback from myself or anyone else on our team. So that kind of covers the main basics of our slides. Let's kind of go to a demo and take a look at what building an Ionic app is really like. So do some slide window hopping over here. So I have my terminal right here. Let me bump up the font size a little bit. And if I wanted to get started with Ionic, really the easiest way to do so is to just run npm install-g at Ionic CLI. This is going to give you the full Ionic CLI and the Ionic command to start new projects, build them, as well as compile your app for native features. I already have this installed, so I don't really need to do anything. But what we're going to do is just run Ionic Start, which is basically how we can scaffold out our project. If you think of it, it's just like any other CLI that you would expect to see. So we'll run Ionic Start. Cool. So we have a little bit of a prompt right here. We can kind of choose our own adventure if we want. What framework do we want to use? Angular, React, or Vue? For this case, I want to use Angular. And I'm going to give it a project name. We'll just call it tempng, just because it's just going to be a temporary directory. And then we could also pick the different starter projects that we want to use. Let's make this a little bit bigger for now. But if we want to, say, use a tabs-based application, if you think of basically Twitter or any other app that's out there, tabs is a common UI paradigm. There's also things like the side menu for having that swipe slide out menu inside of your app. A blank starter if you just want to get like one route with nothing in there. So that way you can just customize it to your heart's content. List, getting started template that goes along with some docs that we have. And then what we call the kitchen sink app, which gives you all of the components that we have to offer, all the different style options. Basically, it's everything all in one app. We're just going to pick the tabs for now. And since I already have this done, I'm not going to risk taking down the internet, trying to install everything. I'm just going to exit this out, and then I'll run cd temp ng. Open up a new terminal, and I'm just going to run Ionic serve. So this is just going to run Ionic serve, which is our live reload server. Important is that we are not trying to recreate the world over here. We are actually just running Angular's own CLI under the hood. So if you're using something like React, you're going to run React scripts. And if you're using something like Vue, you're going to run the Vue CLI as well. So we'll let this run real quick. This is just Angular doing its thing. Resize my terminal. And then I'm just going to open up my editor. Yes, I do use Vim. If you have any comments about that, please keep it to yourself. But I have all the basic things that I need to have here. You could also use VS Code, which is really popular, full-blown Visual Studio, or something like WebStorm, really whatever editor you want. So here, before we get into the code base, here in our browser window, we actually have an app running just using Safari. We can actually, let's just make this, okay, just change the system settings. So we're already doing some pretty awesome things here, giving you a light and a dark theme out of the box. We have this tabs-based interface down here where we can navigate around, change the different components that we are rendering. If you notice, as we click the different tabs, we're getting this really nice animation on the tab button. So let's take a look at what that tab component is. So all of our components kind of start with this ion prefix, kind of keep everything in our own namespace. And we have this ion tabs component. And then down inside of it, we actually have this ion tab bar and ion tab button components, which allow us to build out the entirety of our app. So as we see, we have ion tab bar, which obviously is the greater tab bar piece of our application. We have the ion tab button, which is each individual button. And if we kind of fold each one of them up, we have 3 tab buttons associated with each one of our tabs that we can navigate to. And inside each tab button, we have an icon and then a label to start to name out different features of our app. So if we were to say delete ion label, we can save. And then we got rid of the label for our tab 1 button. And let's just do the same for each and every one of them, because who needs labels these days? Okay, so this looks pretty good. What else can we do? Well, this tab 1 page explore UI components thing, like, this is great. Okay, well, let's click on the link inside of here. Okay, we have a lot of different components that we could use. Things from slides to toast, different modals and navigation paradigms. Well, let's just look at the tab 1 component. So our tab 1 page itself is built up of a few common building blocks. We have this ion header, which is the main action bar that we have up here at the top. So for instance, if we look at the ion header, the toolbar, and we kind of just break it down, we can see what we're actually building, or we can see what the building blocks are of our component. In fact, let's come over here, maximize the window, and just kind of inspect this real quick. Yeah, here we go. So we'll bump up the font size of our element tree. You can see we have ion header, the toolbar, the title, and then the different values inside of each one of these components. So our components have a really nice semantic meaning to each one of their names. So you can kind of once you know what each component does, you can kind of understand how the components piece themselves together. So back over to the editor. Okay, we see this second ion header, and then but we're not actually seeing it inside of the app itself. What gives? Well, let's go back here, and we're just going to use a cool little feature of Safari, and other browsers have this as well, where we can emulate the devices for our users. So in this case, we're just going to emulate an iPhone 8. We'll reload, and whoa, we have a completely different design. This is Resize the Scan. This is giving us our iOS design, where we have a full app that is just fit for an iPhone. In fact, let's delete this App Explorer component, and let's just render out, well, we'll say item $, and we're just going to render out about 100 different, ooh, there we go. About 100 different paragraph tags. So this isn't going to be too much, but as we start to scroll, we see that we have this collapsing header that kind of fades right into the background. So we get some really nice interactions that are all specific to iOS. And if we were to, say, mimic Google Chrome or an Android device, we can kind of gracefully fall back to a different layout that feels more at home for Android. Now, these different items are not really necessary. Let's look at another component that we can use here that's a little bit more interactive. In this case, we're just going to render out an Ion button, and we're going to say, go to next page, and then we'll save that. And you know what? I really like the iOS design, so we're going to go back to our iPhone layout, and we have nothing happening here. So let's go ahead and wire this up with some navigation controls. So in our terminal, what I'm just going to do is just kill the live reload server, and I'm going to run a command to generate a new page. Again, because we're using Angular CLI under the hood, we're just actually running ngg, but we provide our own little shortcuts here, Ionic G page, and we're going to call this the detail page. Now, this is just going to generate some scaffolding for us, and because we're using a different routing layout, we're going to need to modify our project real quick. So we'll come over to this main app routing module, and we're just going to delete this. Oh, don't worry. We'll go over what the actual details are for this in a moment. And we're just going to... actually, we will not do it in here. We'll go to our tab 1 route, and then we'll go to the tab 1 routing module, and then render out a new detail here, and we'll just update the different paths. And this will be detail module, and then we will resolve that final module. Don't mind me, just kind of speaking out loud right here. All we're really doing here is saying when we load this module, aka this kind of higher level object for this page, instead of going to the tab 1 component, let's also include another entry for the detail path, which we can navigate to inside of our app. We'll save, go back to our tabs 1 page, start up our live reload server again, and on our Ion button, we're going to create something called a router link, where we can just link to a new page in our app. We'll good. We have this up and running. So let's go to detail because this is the new page that we want to navigate to. And cool, we have our page navigated to. We can swipe to go back as well, but it'd be really awesome if we had some kind of back button over here to automatically manage that, because maybe we're on Android and we don't have swipe to go back. So let's go to detail, and we're going to go to the detail page, and we have, like I said, the kind of core building blocks of our app. So inside of our toolbar, we're going to create something called Ion buttons, and we're going to give it a positional argument called slot, where we're just going to say slot equals start. So all this slot really means is I want to render this at this position. And start meaning we're going to go from left to right. So start means give me all the way to the left. If we were in right to left, that would mean all the way to the right. So inside of our Ion buttons, we're going to create an Ion back button. Ion back button. So we'll go back to our page. We'll save, go forward, and hey, did you look at that? Okay, so here we get an interesting opportunity to look at some of the interactions that are happening here that you don't have to manage. So one of the big ones being is that as we go from the active page back to our original page, we have this interaction with the back button where it starts to transition down and actually becomes the text for our previous view, which is pretty awesome. If we look at it going forward, we can actually see that transition happening. And as we go back, it's actually much faster. So it feels like this really nice fluid motion. Okay, well, what else can we do? Well, let's go ahead and let's just say here is some content. We'll save. Oh no. Okay, we're stuck on this page. How we can't swipe to go back because we basically reloaded and we lost our previous state. Not to worry. Ion back button actually has a property on here called default href, where we can say, hey, if we have no history and we ended up on this page, we should just go to tabs, tab 1, or tabs, tab 1. And if we have history, don't worry, just go back to whatever our previous view is. So let's save this again. And cool, we have our back button here. And if you think about deep loading into a app from like a push notification, maybe we already want to go to a page that's like 3 routes deep. Well, this is our way of giving you breadcrumbs to go back to the main aspect of your app without having to actually handle up how these transition and how these routes work. So it's a really nice kind of way of piecing this all together. So what if we wanted to get, say, our geolocation? So this is going to go in a little bit more of a different direction. So we'll create a new Ion button, and we will click and say get location, change the inner text to say something, get my position, and then go back to our tab 1 page and start to integrate with some of the native features. So for this, we're going to import from a new package called CapacitorCore, and we're going to import this plugins object. Now, this plugins object is really just a way for us to access different features. One of the ones that we're going to look at is, like I said, location, and this is actually available in the browser. So we can just say async get location because all of these APIs are going to be asynchronous. We can start to destructure some of our methods here. So we only need the one geolocation object. And then we say const lock equals, or const results equals await geolocation dot get current position. Notice This is all using TypeScript, so we get nice auto completion and deep understanding of each of the methods. So if we want to say, what's the actual value here? Well, this is going to return, this is actually going to return the current GPS location of our device. If we check out the type for our results, it's going to say, okay, the type is geolocation position. So we'll create a new class member called location or lock. And it's just going to be, we'll give it a type of any, because TypeScript will let us do that. And we'll say this dot lock equals res dot coordinates. Okay, so we're getting a lot of information here. We're basically getting all of the different latitude, longitude, accuracy, all of these different features. But if you notice these little question marks at the end of them, that's because altitude accuracy, the speed, the heading, these are all optional features that exist on iOS and on Android, but maybe don't exist in the browser. So we can mark those as optional, and we can start to safely code around this. Well, I'm just going to say this.lock equals, I'm going to actually do a quick little trick and just destructure this and say lat equals res.coordinates.latitude, and then long equals res.coordinates coords.longitude, and we'll close that off. And then this should be good. We can go to our tabs one page, and we can just render this out saying lock, and then pipe it through some JSON filtering so we actually have some good formatting. So we'll call GetMyPosition. Nothing's going to happen. This is actually just a random quirk of Safari. We can't actually do it because we're over HTTP, but this gives us a great opportunity to deploy it to a real device. So we'll just do a quick little build here because we just need an actual binary, like web build of our app before we go further. And this also gives me a great opportunity to get a sip of water. All right, we have this done. So let's go ahead. We want to deploy this to our to an iOS device, so we can just run this capacitor project, which we have up here. We can use this to actually generate our native binary or our native app. So we can run npx capacitor. We will say add iOS. This is going to generate an iOS project for us. So this will generate an Xcode workspace, install dependencies through CocoaPods. We can watch this update real quick. It doesn't really take too long because I've updated it recently. And we get this little output from the command to open up Xcode. So we say npx cap, open iOS. Oh no. Install required components. We're not going to do iOS because that takes forever to install additional components. And this is going to be one of the rare cases where Android will be faster than iOS. Hopefully that doesn't cause any issues. So we'll just say npx cap open Android. And as I said earlier, I updated and opened Android Studio relatively recently, so it should be pretty fast. Yeah, don't worry. So we have a full-fledged Android project, which it can look scary. Don't worry too much, just because it looks like it's a scary thing, or it looks like it's pretty daunting. At least to me, it does. I'm going to assume it's daunting for everybody else, but probably not, because I never used IntelliJ before. But if you've used IntelliJ before, this is um, basically the same thing. So we have this little Android virtual device. I'm just going to run it on a Pixel 3, and this really, really nice, informative play button to say run. So we have our Android simulator up here and running. At the same exact time, I'm going to open up a new Chrome window. Go to Chrome dash inspect to open up our DevTools. We have the app launching up over here. So we should see our inspected target. So yeah, we see the web view, we see the package name, we see the location. So we are loading up an Android web view. We can open up the DevTools. So now we have access to all of Chrome's debugging capabilities. We can still navigate around our app, still getting the different UI updates. Go to Android, have a different UI and animation experience that feels right at home for Android. We will go up and look at our different console logs. Cool. Calling get geolocation. And here we have the latitude and longitude for my location. If that seems pretty small to you, I will try to make this bigger. Yeah, that should be a little bit bigger. You can see the results here. We have the actual call to native and then the actual results coming back. So we have this really nice, pretty fast feedback cycle. We can make this even faster, actually, if we run Ionic cap run Android, and we're going to pass it this live reload flag, which is going to let us do a live development cycle on our Android device, whether it be a real device or an emulator, and it's going to let us change these features right inside of the app. So we're just going to hit this button next to our device selector again, which is going to stop the app and then start the app up again. If I actually, we'll just run external because it's an emulator. We just need to pass in the external flag to load that up. So small little hiccup on my part. So this shouldn't take too long. Yeah, copying assets over, cool. So we'll hit this play button again to reinstall the app. Cool, using app server, pointing to an IP address. Awesome, so we're inside of our app. Let's make changes. So let's go to our tab 1 page, and let's just change this title to say, hello world. We'll save. And cool, we got our changes automatically being applied. We can still call our get location and get the geolocation data because we are just calling the native location service for this device, and still have this pretty nice feedback cycle of a web-based approach with live reload, and then accessing these native features as we need them. So that's my demo so far. Let's kind of go back to the slides and kind of wrap up a little bit, and we'll open it up for Q&A afterwards. But let's kind of close up some parting thoughts here. One of the big goals with Ionic is to just give developers the best step forward to building a native app using web technology, something we like to call web native. Basically, you shouldn't have to struggle to build an app with web technologies, and you shouldn't have to struggle to build an app using web technologies. And if we can give at least, a little bit of a push forward and help you build this out, then we're meeting our goals. Obviously, we like to go and push you forward above and beyond, but no, we can't write the app for you. Regardless of what framework and technology you want to use, be it Vue, React, Angular, or no framework at all, we want to be able to be available there for you as well. So obviously we have support for Angular, but if you are a React person or Vue.js or no framework at all, Ionic supports those environments as well. If you want to enable seamless integration with native device features, we looked at geolocation, but you could also do things like local notifications as well, push notifications. Capacitor is our way to do that, and we think it's pretty awesome. We had like maybe 3 lines of code, and we already had geolocation data being rendered in our app. Basically, our goal is to make it so that way you can just build awesome apps without having to struggle. So if you want to know more about Ionic and how to get started, if you have never touched it before, definitely check out ionicframework.com/docs. These are every single thing that we've learned over the past 5-6 years that we've been working on Ionic and building out pretty awesome documentation, but also getting you up and running the right way. If you are more interested in the native shell feature, which is called Capacitor, you could go to capacitorjs.com/docs. Capacitor and Ionic actually can be used separately. So if you want to just use Capacitor with your own framework, you can do that as well. And if you want to use Ionic without Capacitor, you can do that as well. If you are already getting started with Ionic and you run into some kind of issue, we have a dedicated forum with millions of members that are answering questions, asking questions, helping people build better apps. So these are some pretty great resources to check out. Screenshot this if you want. I think I gave the links to Serene beforehand, so she'd be able to give you all of these links, hopefully in the chat. If not, I can copy them down afterwards and paste it. But from there, I want to open it up to questions. So I'm going to end the slides, and I'm going to bring up StreamYard and start to look at some of the comments.
Did you want me to keep the slides up or take them down?
You can keep the slides up.
Okay. Cool. First of all, thank you for that talk. That was really amazing. I think like what you covered there in 45 minutes gave everybody here a really good foundation on being able to like actually deliver a cross-platform app that's functional, which is I think pretty crazy for a framework. There are a lot of similarities there with the generators and how Rails works. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's funny, the generators. So we looked at them, and this was for Angular, which powers all those generators. And Angular's own CLI was forked off of Ember CLI, which was then also inspired by the Rails CLI. So it was this really nice kind of, if you're a Rails developer and you had experience with that, these generators do the same exact thing and give you those really strong opinions.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody's going to have their own opinions, but I really like opinionated frameworks because I feel like somebody else has thought about it and made the hard decisions for me, and it's going to work for the majority of applications. You're always going to have a few that don't quite fit in to that mold, but like generally most applications are still going to work with that framework. So first of all, yeah, so like thanks for that talk. I didn't really mention it before, but Mike's coming to us from Rhode Island across the border. Like we're not going to let him in to Canada, but we can chat with him online. That's okay.
I don't even think I'm allowed in.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think any American is.
But we're happy to hang out with you online. I met Mike last year at the All Things Open conference, and we had some really good conversations. And he was actually there for the inception of my Twitter account. That's a really great story. So
true story.
That was good times. Because you do work for Ionic, I mean, I guess you are going to you're going to be a little bit more biased. Do you feel like there's anything that Ionic doesn't currently do that they're working on, or that you would wish that they would do better? From a dev perspective, not like an Ionic perspective.
I would say probably the best thing, or the best way to answer that is there are things that we focus on that maybe don't cover every single use case. Like, I wouldn't suggest somebody build a heavy 3D game with Ionic or JavaScript in general. I'd probably suggest that they use something like Unity or some specialized tool that's fit for that. So outside of the different kind of apps that you could build, figuring out which ones are going to be a good fit for JavaScript in general, Ionic knows that, hey, we're not perfect for every single use case, but if you're a big data company, or if you're like 90% of the apps that are out there in the App Store, we're a good fit for you.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to pull up some questions from the comments here. And I think we should see them up on the screen there.
Oh, awesome. So, does Capacitor handle bio-authentication, face fingerprint for iOS, and whatever Android has to offer? Yes. So let me actually pull this up, because we have a really awesome section about this in our docs for Capacitor. So if you go to the docs section, we have some pretty decent plugins that are available. Kind of the standard ones: accessibility, background tasks, consoles, clipboard. But we also have this pretty awesome community scope for third-party plugins that we kind of help vet and give the developers resources and access to, essentially us, to develop. So one of them, I believe it's Iris, or is it Face? It's somewhere in here, but yeah, there should be a plugin that can offer support for that. And if not, building a plugin is actually quite easy compared to other approaches. The API is pretty simple and pretty easy to get around and integrate with.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Perry. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, just follow up in the chat, and then we can follow up on that. So the next question is from Patrick.
On the React side, is it right? Wrapping create React app? Yes. So a React app will just use the create React app CLI under the hood, or React scripts under the hood. So if you have some customizations, or if you've already injected, or if you have your own homebrewed React scripts kind of hacked together Webpack config thingamajig, you can still use that as well. You could even just replace the Ionic CLI with that CLI. We only really care about getting the web build out afterwards. So yes, you can use React create React app, or whatever else you want. A long-winded yes.
All right, that was easy.
Do push notifications coming from an outside service like OneSignal require Capacitor? Yes. Since Capacitor itself is the native runtime, and push notifications kind of only exist in native, in like 90% of the use cases, our push notifications plugin is going to be the thing that you want. I don't know. Do we have one specific for OneSignal? No, we don't. But the push notifications plugin should just allow you to register and or register with an authority and with a push notification service to get notifications into your app, whether you're using something like OneSignal or managing it yourself.
Okay. Next one there for Richard.
Richard, can Ionic components be incrementally introduced into an existing app? Yeah, actually they can. So didn't cover it too much, but I don't want to print. I haven't had to print anything in years. Um, inside of where are we? Here we go. Inside of our app, if we look at the main module for Angular, all we're really providing is this Ionic module, which gives us access to all the different components. So if you have an app that already exists, you can install the Ionic package, add this to your root app module or to any other module that you have, and you can start using Ionic's components. Pretty simple. If you already have an Angular app, even easier. You could run ng-add at Ionic Angular, and it'll automatically handle that for you.
Are there similar ones for React?
There is not, only because React does not have an ng-add feature. If you did have an existing React app, it'd be as simple as running npm Ionic React. And if you have React Router, Ionic React Router, which we wrap to provide the transitions and animations, which you could also incrementally add to your existing.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
How does Ionic handle permissions for device APIs? That is actually managed through Capacitor. So we didn't really see it for some reason on Android, which makes me nervous for Android right now. But if we go to our tab 1, anytime we were to call geolocation.getCurrentPosition, actually, I think we can see it inside of, as I navigate multiple different windows over here. If we go to localhost 8100, get my position, Capacitor should be able to manage permissions, making sure that you are getting them. I already allowed it on this host, but on native, you would also get the native prompt and the native notification say, hey, this app wants to know your location. You could give it the reasons and the details for why you want the location, which obviously you should, best practices. Capacitor handles all that for you.
Okay.
Ionic have hot reload as well as live reload. I never quite got the difference in these. I guess it would depend on your framework of choice. I know Vue has hot module reloading. I don't know about React app or React scripts or the Angular CLI. But if you're using Vue, you get hot module reloading, for better or for worse. I don't particularly like it.
Sounds positive.
It leads to some pretty interesting bugs that pop up.
Yeah, for sure. Ben, if you want to follow up on that question, just post another question in YouTube, and we can come up to that.
Yeah. How do you reuse components if the web doesn't have access to certain capacitor plugins, contacts, or sharing? If there is some sort of conditional. So yes, you can handle that. For instance, if we didn't want to use something like async await over here, we could do something like return geolocation.getCurrentPositions. Then we would return a promise that would either resolve or reject. So we could say results. We could just remove that over here. And then if we have an error, well, we could assume that either the permissions were not met or we're on a platform where this doesn't exist. Obviously, geolocation will exist in a browser, but if we are, say, using your contacts example, if there's no access to that feature, we can just catch the rejected promise, try catch if you want to stay async await, or handle the rejection on the promise using the Pure Promise API. Hopefully that answers it.
Well, your answers are always so simple.
It's not me. It's Capacitor itself. It's pretty
I really
simple
hope
and
you're
pretty
not
easy.
just making stuff up.
Hmm?
I hope you're not making stuff up.
No.
This last one we have here is from Ben.
So how does this compare to similar tool chains like Expo? Actually, it's pretty similar in a sense that Expo itself is really just giving you a higher level abstraction on top of React Native. So they're giving you obviously components, but also more detailed uh, interactions with things like a camera view, more built out components, more built out things that you can add to your app without ever having to touch that native code. Ionic kind of operates in that same space where not only do we give you the components, we also give you the native interactions via Capacitor. So it's pretty on par for features and performance. We just happen to be using HTML for our UI, and Expo just happens to be using React Native. So I would say they're pretty similar. Just whatever is your favorite approach to building apps.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any other questions in chat there. So thank you again so much for coming and speaking at our tiny little local meetup. I realize that it's like 2 hours ahead for you and it's getting pretty late. So really appreciate your time. And I hope that we can hang out next year at a conference in person, because we planned to this year and that didn't work out. And we're definitely going to go to the arcade again. And then I'm going to kick your butt at DDR again. So
Probably will, because I'm horrible at it.
You can prepare yourself for that as much as you can.
Hopefully that'll only be a year away.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully it will only be a year away. But other than that, it's really great seeing you at online conferences all year. And I'm glad that we have this ability to keep in touch and to bring you into our local meetup. Really appreciated your talk. Do you have somewhere where you have like the code base that you made today?
I don't actually, but if you follow me on Twitter, shameless plug for my social media, I'll tweet out the links to the demo app. So you can clone it, mess around with it, check it out.
Okay, perfect. So I think in the meetup description, I'm just going to add a link then to your Twitter account, and then people can follow you and get more information there. Is it okay if they reach out to you with any questions?
Yeah, definitely. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your knowledge with us. It's so great to see you and just like seeing other people in the world is just amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next month.